those of you who don't know Simon, he was the CMO for Dell in the UK, 25 years in tech services marketing, was at Acer, Toshiba and Microsoft. So I think we can say Simon knows all of our industry very, very well. He's a CIM, Chartered Institute of Marketing course director and a fellow. He also lectures at the University of Kent. He's on the council for the Institute of Direct and Digital Marketing and also the Data and Marketing Association. And also, he's an author of 2 books. So I've got one here. So we've got Innovative B2B Marketing. So if you've not got a copy, I'd encourage you to grab a copy of that. And then also B2B Digital Marketing Strategies as well. So, so fabulous. So I think you've all seen kind of the overview for tonight's session. So Simon's going to take us through solutions marketing and really look at different strategies and insights and getting us really thinking about kind of being a little bit more innovative as well in what we do. So Simon, over to you.
Okay, so let's get started. So first of all, what do we mean by solutions? Solutions can be defined in different ways. There's very technology-based solutions. There's solutions which are all around the business need. So whether we are there to develop solutions to improve customer satisfaction or experience, sometimes we come up with a solution based on a problem. And in other cases, it can be highly specialized and customized. So obviously, when I talk to people here in this forum, some of you who are dealing with additional complexity of channel partners or partnerships, and that's certainly some of the things that I come across, is just adds an additional complexity in delivering solutions and developing solutions. Some of the challenges I would say that we find in marketing solutions is solutions tend to be very comprehensive. So the comprehensiveness and the nature of a solution can be quite challenging in putting together. If we are usually when we're in an organization where we have elements of products and services, and typically every company typically has some sort of products and services, it involves some internal collaboration, which may not always be easy. It involves integration externally as well sometimes. And other times it's about matching customer expectations, and quite often what a customer is thinking about in terms of a solution may not always match what we think a solution is that we put together and then deliver to a customer. I mentioned that channel VAR agendas. This is where, I don't know if anybody's been in these situations where you have maybe some great propositions and products and maybe some service and software, and you want to deliver it through a channel partner. What sometimes happens is, because the software and or service is margin rich, or something which the channel reseller or a partner is wanting to make money off and profitability, they don't want you to deliver as well the service and software. So you need to then find a way to I deal with that sort of conflict or that agenda that they have, or find a way to sort of integrate that. So there can be quite difficult. There can be some difficulties in dealing with those sort of things. Lack of process communication as well can be a hindrance to a marketing solution. So I just wanted to mention a few things. It's not all bad news. There are good things in solutions marketing. So if we are really good at solutions marketing, we typically can see much more growth opportunities. We can align better to a customer. It's usually more profitable. It helps differentiate ourselves if we do it effectively, and ultimately improves customer loyalty. So a lot of good things if we do it well. And doing it well, I think, is the thing that sounds easy, but it's not so easy in practice. So I thought I wanted to talk through some practical tools, or some specific tools that you may or may not have come across in the past, in terms of how do we go about getting to a solution. So the first thing I would say that is we really want to understand is this identification of the problem. And some of you may have come across this thing called the value proposition canvas, which I think it's really good in its simplicity, because it basically it really just gets to the core of things. So here we're saying you can typically start with a profile, and then you would basically talk through what are the pains of that customer. So in this case, the negative experiences that a customer has today, the emotions and risks that they are dealing with in a proposition or offering. So we typically want to understand that a bit more. So that pain or emotions or challenges or negative experience may vary depending on whether you're talking to a channel partner or B2B customer who is a procurement head or a finance director or somebody else. So it can actually change. So we probably need to think, what are the pains relating to the persona? And then, of course, one of the things we want to do once we've identified the pains, it's how do we actually do an effective job in relieving that pain? So that would be, how does the product or service address that particular negative experience that they're talking about? So this all sounds fairly obvious, I would say, probably to some of us, but it's not as obvious to find that or identify that. We don't always get the honesty or the richness in answer when we try to talk to some customers. So this is really something that I think is the fundamental basis of getting to a really good solution. The other one I thought is actually quite interesting. This actually, I call it peeling back the onion, which is about identifying the who and the why they want something. So this kind of one tool that I found really works well in companies and in identifying this is the 5 whys. Some of you may have come across this in other disciplines. So for example, if I would start from the outer circle here, I would basically say, why does a customer buy a server to host a CRM application? Why do they want to host a CRM application? To manage their customer data. Why do they want to target their market more? So why do they want to manage their customer data? To target their market more effectively. Why do they want to target that market more effectively? To drive efficiency in their marketing efforts. And you can go further. And this is where some of us may talk about root causing, or going down a few layers to get to the real bottom of the reason why somebody purchases something. And you may say, well, that's great. Or why are you telling me this, Simon? Well, the thing that I'm interested in is that those arrows on the right, which is, if we just ask the first question, quite often we do just ask one question, you would say, well, it's the IT department because they're buying a server, and you would maybe make an assumption. Or maybe you get to a CRM application, you say, well, typically it's operations that are dealing with that. And so that would be an assumption again. Or if they're managing customer data, maybe sales and ops. But actually, in effect, what is happening here is it was marketing that was looking for this. So this is where I think we do need to go down the layers of looking at those, getting those answers, because actually our initial assumptions in the first questions when we dig into this may be off whack and wrong, and therefore we get the wrong target persona, and we have obviously then are thinking wrong in terms of what is the solution. So this is where I'd say we also want to get to identify the who and the why. And one thing that you might have come across is this thing called means end analysis. This is basically another way to sort of identify why a customer would buy your product. So buyer reasons can be divided typically into 3 main groups. They can buy a product for features, for its benefits, for values. And this is where it gets interesting, because we've all looked at features and benefits. We all talk about in our marketing communications and our websites and whatever. We've got a lot of features and benefits highlighted, but do we have the values in there as well? And that's probably I would say the underpinning thing that we really want to get into. So the really unique individual values that different people, different roles have in organizations, if it's B2B, or otherwise if it's B2C, but I'm thinking more B2B here. What would be the underpinning values behind why they're buying this? What are the things that's driving them? So how do we get into this? So the first thing I would say is think about your features. Features normally deliver benefits. Those benefits in turn are delivering values. Let's look at an example. So if I looked at a feature, low energy components. I was talking to a B2B company that specialized in semiconductors the healthcare sector last year. So they had some quite specialized features. One was a low energy component. The benefit was low energy consumption. The value would be sustainability or energy efficiency, for example. So obviously you're looking for different values, but it's good to understand that value being that underpins the benefit and feature. And they're more interesting to talk about, actually, because they may resonate more with customers rather than just talking about features and benefits. One of the things I thought would be worth mentioning, this actually comes from this triangle or pyramid here, comes from the Harvard Business Review. They did a big study because everyone sort of, when we talk about values, we talk a lot about, consumers and individuals, but we actually don't talk about values in a B2B sense as much. And they were kind of did this very first cut of an article. It's fairly recent by Harvard Business Review terms, it's about 5 or 6 years ago, and they came up with this pyramid of there are actually B2B values. So there's kind of functional values, there's ease of doing business, and individual values they identified, which is on this pyramid. And they said those are the things you really want to look at because they do underpin whether a customer is going to work with you or not. And they'll speak to a customer or that particular role better sometimes than just saying features or benefits. And so I thought it was quite interesting that, we probably want to talk more about this idea of value. So how do we identify these? I thought I'd just put this in the box. So talk in person to people, conduct a round table to get to the bottom of those values that maybe some of those customers are thinking about. We could create a benefits value survey, customer choose from values and ranks those values, use opportunity to discuss, have sidebar discussions at events. So I've done all of these in the past myself, and I've done some of this also in terms of going through sort of workshops as well. So they do work to get to the bottom of those value elements, and they're great for sort of putting into some of your communicating the solution and communicating what your product or offering. I say offering because it's better than just saying product, service, and solutions every time. The other thing I thought would be interesting to mention is this idea of, we often talk about features and then benefits as if that's where it all stops. And I thought it'd be interesting to talk you through something called that I came across a while back called the Guru Tree. It was actually back when I was in Dell, and it was basically saying that we often talk about things at the base of a tree. It was actually from a PR training person I spoke to, another one. That's really interesting. And he said we often talk about our products in the kind of the lowest common denominator. We're like, okay, you got this thing and you get these benefits. And he said if you can get to a more more trying to find the right word, far-reaching sort of impacting messaging, you're gonna have a lot better inroads into customers. And I thought I'd just share with you here an example. So, for example, if we were selling, apologies for the IT example, but if a company was wanted to purchase a set of notebooks for their sales force, level one stuff is where we typically do well, and we see a lot of, which is sales can access the data faster because they can manage the data faster with this new computing power, and we're great at talking about all of that sort of stuff in the kind of the IT industry. But then do we get enough to the next level, which is sales productivity improves? Do we articulate that and explain that? And that will be the benefit. And what I'm saying is, if we can get to the next stage up, and that's what this guy was also saying, you're going to have a much greater impact typically on customers in terms of your messaging, in terms of how you talk about yourselves, which is how you actually have an impact on a customer's revenue. So what it is that you're doing, what's the story that you're telling that is going to actually impact the customer's own revenue and margin and profitability, if it's one of those things. So he was saying, don't be not here. So that's where I'm saying not here, but you need to get here if you really want to talk about those indirect benefits and bigger solutions, and sort of pull ourselves out of this feature benefits discussion. So that's really what I wanted to say in terms of the starting points in terms of solutions. So we want to better analyze problems. We want to better identify the customer, make connections to values and solutions values rather than features, and look for those indirect and bigger solutions. So other points I would say in terms of doing good solutions marketing, and I'm talking about marketing in the broader sense, not just messaging, is it makes sure that we also are service focused. We have a greater level of customer intimacy, which is difficult for marketeers sometimes. We don't always get as much exposure as we'd like to customers, but I think it's good to get that intimacy, how they operate, what they're trying to do today and tomorrow. And then obviously look at steps in creating, delivering the solution. So those are kind of some points around how we move the business to a more solution-centered perspective. So if I would compare to a product perspective, and we looked at different sort of aspects like value propositions, we would talk about winning with innovative products and having enriched features. With a solution, we talk about superior customer solutions. In terms of value creation, that's typically we talk about, we create the value as a firm and we deliver that value, and that's the product perspective. Solutions is no, the value is co-created. We co-create that with the customer. So you get the sense here in terms of what is a solution-centered perspective. So that's really what I've been talking about up to now, really, with the kind of the tools that we could use to get there. So we got through kind of this idea of product-centered, solution-centeredness, how we identify needs and problems. We talked about sort of a little bit about developing the solution. So I don't want to get now into this idea of perspectives and how do we understand perspectives? How do we support with the right skills? So this is where we get into this thing of difference in opinions. So, there's a different opinions in what a solution is. So organizations mistakenly view solutions as customized, integrated combinations of products and services. I know, and I'm obviously I'm generalizing here, so apologies if I know people maybe on this course are not thinking that, but that's kind of what is kind of seen generally. It's a general view, whereas customers see it as, okay, you define our requirements really well, you are customizing, integrating a good, but you're also dealing with deployment and post-deployment. And I often see that kind of forgotten. Deployment, post-deployment obviously means different things for different companies and for their products, but I think that's the thing that we don't always deal with when we think about a solution, whereas a customer is really wanting that. We kind of sometimes get into this sort of, we've got the business and now it's the sales job or account manager's job to deal with it. And so I think there's roles that need to happen in getting to this, what I call the solutions blueprint. The supplier's role is that we have these activities that are coordinated between different units, if that's the case in these bigger companies. We have skill sets that get us there. So what I call multi-domains, I mean multi-product. So I don't know if any of you come across this, where you're in an organization and you have maybe different products and there's different product specialities and experts around, and you, in order to get to a solution, you need able to hop between them to be able to get to the solution. So that multi-domain is not an easy skill, but it's something it's definitely required. And then there's the other one, which is boundary spanning, and I'll come to that in a moment. I also think there needs to be a cross-unit collaboration culture. So some companies like 3M and Google do this really well, where they basically say it's embedded into your contract that you must, for 20% of your time, you must work on projects that will actually involve you working between departments or interdisciplinary or interdepartmental aspects. So they actually have it embedded into the contract. Other companies are just very, very siloed, and you don't always have the permission to then move between these different units in these different areas. So it's good to get that culture, supporting that, documenting, being able to document solutions. I don't know if any of you've had to do this, but I remember when I went to Microsoft about 5 or 6 years into my career. And the guy on the second day said, I need you to document the end-to-end solution. I'm like, I'm glad I did do that already, but it's like the first thing he said, I need you to document the end-to-end solution. He didn't ask operations, he didn't ask, finance or sales, whatever. He asked marketing, and it seems to be one of those things that we do quite a lot, this sort of end-to-end thing. So this documenting, and it is an art that's developed. I'm sure any of you have had to do it. It's a bit of an art to get there, because you really got to hop between lots of different people to get to this view. And then there's the customer's role, which is, are they willing to adapt and adjust certain routines? So are they also providing information regarding who needs to be spoken to, who needs to be involved. So a bit of stakeholder management there, I guess, and then operational counseling in terms of how this actually rolls out and how this is going to work. So obviously some of this is going beyond the scope of marketing in the literal sense, but these are things that we need to sort of get around. And then there's this idea of boundary spanning. We've got boundary spanning, between layers in hierarchies, internally within the organization, sometimes horizontally across functions, departments, stakeholders, so beyond the boundaries of the firm with the external partners. So I'm sure a lot of you who part of the Coterie membership are doing those sort of things, and then also across regions sometimes. So not just beyond your current location or nation, but maybe internationally even. So that's where I think boundary spanning becomes a big deal. So just from the experience of the guy that I was talking to that did actually build the solutions program, he actually had about 25 years experience behind him when I hired him, and he absolutely needed to do all of these things to get to this solution. I wanted to share with you, before I get to sort of explain the Dell solution program and explain what was so good at, how it worked. I wanted to talk through a couple of companies that I think are doing some really good solutions marketing. Now, UPS actually just changed their website about a half a year ago, but they still do some interesting stuff with marketing solutions. And so obviously this is a forwarding company, shipping company, so they could be very shipping based. But actually, when you dig into some of their solutions, they have solutions for growing your business or starting a business, for growing online. They obviously have other things relating to the area they work in. But I thought it was quite interesting. You can actually find so they have under software solutions you need for growing your business or expanding your business online. So I just did a snapshot from their website there. So do take a look, because I think they've done a good job of, they don't have a very crowded website header. They just have 4 headings. One of those 4 is business solutions. So I'm sure if we did some heat mapping on that, we'd find out that'd be clicked on quite a lot. And I'll mention another one in a moment. So what works then to, what's some of the things that are underpinning good solutions beyond what I've just mentioned? I think one thing I would say is customer language is a key one, that we do talk the language of the customer. I know that sounds like a very obvious and no-brainer comment to make, but I would say even the biggest corporations make the mistake. I remember when I was at Dell, there was this whole big global campaign revolving around this particular term relating to convergence, and nobody in the UK market really understood it. And we found out late in the day that was not understood as a term, but by that point we'd actually spent loads of money on a campaign. So even the bigger companies can get this wrong. That's what I'm trying to say. So customer language is really important to check. Real understanding of needs, real understanding of the solution. So I remember this time when I was sitting in so basically we started with creating solutions for the healthcare sector, so IT solutions for the healthcare sector, and our GM at the time said, great, this is what we need from you, because what we currently have for marketing is just not good enough, or was not usable. So the guy that was in my team that was leading the public sector marketing went away and put a presentation together. We got in a room and he presented, and the lady turned to me, this GM turned to me and said, that's very nice, thank you for all the work, Simon, and this other gentleman, but that's not a solution. And I said, what do you mean that's not a solution? Everything's integrated, it's storage and servers and networking and everything, and it's explaining all of the sort of ways that can sort of deliver these great things and benefits and all the rest. He said, yes, but it's not a solution. And I said, well, what do you mean by a solution? He said, well, for me, a solution would be, how do we contribute to the cure for cancer? How do we reduce patient queues? How do we deal with patient data and managing data integrity for patient records? And she went through a whole list and said, you haven't mentioned any of that. And I'm like, okay, interesting. I don't know if anybody's had these situations where you kind of have this sort of light bulb of more than a light bulb, something like you kind of take a step back and realize, okay, I've just been doing it all wrong. We kind of walked away from that and said, we've thought too much about the solution in terms of feature benefits. We haven't thought, and I'm thinking about the IT guy, we haven't thought about the actual business that's operating. In this case, it was a hospital or a healthcare business. We haven't thought about what they're trying to ultimately achieve, and how do we actually deal with that. And that was kind of this thing of solutions. Are we actually talking about a customer solution, a solution for the customer in their mind, or is it just what we say? So that was kind of the thing that I thought was kind of interesting. And then it shifted the whole mindset in terms of we need to just get to a better way of doing solutions. So I'll come to the process that we put in place in a moment. But I would say definitely getting that discussion, the very honest conversation, making sure there's no sort of defensiveness on either side, but just getting to a very honest conversation about what is a solution here, and having customers integrated into that is definitely key. That then leads to better buy-in, better sales adoption. And then the other thing I would say, when we communicate solutions, they're normally a bit more complicated and complex. So definitely we need videos and webinars, better visuals, interactive visuals. You might be surprised, but sometimes we might even need a kind of printed thing. Apparently, this was actually, even back then in 2014, 15, this was winning some really major deals where for 4 years we weren't getting into, and we just put a lead behind on a senior executive's desk, or asked the receptionist to do that. And it then drove some really interesting calls, which then gave us some first business. And I'm not talking about small business, I'm talking about like £50,000 deals and those sort of things that were coming through. So, everything I know is we talk about digital today, but you might want to think also about, how do we make an impact? Because, so can you make an impact online as well? Do you need to make an impact through video, webinars, or other means? And of course, things like workshops and seminars are good as well. I'm not going to spend too much time going through this, but I would say you definitely want to think about a messaging template, something like this. We'd have to fill this out, by the way. There's one of the things I was institutionalizing for some of the team to say, listen, you really need to think about the solution, the pains, the value proposition, and the benefits, and really think about the benefit messages. We didn't insist on 6 benefits, by the way. It's just there might be sometimes up to 6 benefits that we would talk about. So I'm not saying you have to get to 6 here. I wanted to quickly talk about this example in terms of the solutions program that I felt open, well, not felt, it did open lots of doors in business and drive incremental business. So the first thing I would say was this idea of problem recognition. We talked about that. Requirements outlined. So what is the requirements in terms of the solution? One important point and step in the whole solutions process was getting the GM buy-in. Like, okay, so when that lady said to me, this is not a solution, we said, okay, well, if we're going to walk away and really do this right, are you going to then, invest and support us in this? And obviously the answer was yes. And I said, okay, so that we need a dedicated salesperson, not all the time. We're talking like 1 day a month in terms of time. That actually could be part of this initiative. And that we actually got someone that had about 20 to 30 years experience from all the, from each of the different sectors we were looking at. So they were actually, then we had the sales and marketing alignment check. The thing that I think worked really well was we had an agency that is still in operation. They're really good, and they were enabling these whiteboard sessions in terms of mapping out these solutions. That went into being compiled, and then it's reviewed by the salesperson, the account manager, and actually a customer was actually reviewing this document. And then, of course, formality-wise, we had to have a brand compliancy check, and it was finally approved and then launched. So the enablers, I would say, were strong GM backing, non-defensiveness, having an agency pulling it all together and facilitating it, checking the customer language, and making it easy to read and access. And we then came up with the first healthcare solutions program or guide, which had about 10 or 12 solutions in there. And then this was expanded to all the public sector, all the private sector vertical areas. And then it went to global and the US. So the example was this one, actually. I think it's still there available on that link if you want to have a look at it. But it just gives you an example. That was kind of the easy to read example. There are many more examples in that document, but this gives you a feel for the solutions program. But obviously, it was more than just a digital brochure. It was, interactiveness, digital assets, and various other sort of formats that it was created in. And that was back then. Just to finish up, if you ask me, there's another company out there that does some really good work. I would say IAG Cargo does some really good work. They actually do solutions by industries and by product. Here's their industry-based solution. So they have a whole different solution for aerospace, animal transport, pharmaceuticals. IAG Cargo are those that are responsible for the delivery of goods for British Airways, Iberia, and Aer Lingus. I actually had the fortune to spend 2 days with them, and they were telling me all these interesting stories about delivering different things is not just about putting them on a plane somewhere and then sending them off. There's a lot of work in each of these different areas that need to be treated very differently. So for pharmaceuticals, they actually had a constant climate solution. So if you go to product solutions, you'll see something called constant climate, which basically means they keep the pharmaceuticals below, I think it's something like below -5 degrees or something at all times, which in transit is not as easy as it sounds because it's constantly being moved around. And I said, what would be the problem if it went above that? And he said, well, you're talking about a shoebox that could be worth 90 million in pounds. And if that goes wrong in transit, then of course we're picking up that through insurance. So it could be quite expensive. So I thought it was quite interesting, some of the different conversations that they were explaining to us in terms of how they created the solutions and how they market them. Kind of wanted to sum it up with kind of the key areas that I think are really important, which would be value proposition development, intimacy with customers, getting better at integrating processes, better at integrating sales, and strategic alignment would be the big ones that I would say need to support good solutions marketing.